Okay, testing. Do a quick audio check here. Make sure I'm good. It says I'm live. Okay. It's public. All right, we're good. I'm not sure I can test the audio. Can I test the audio? Let's try this. No, not really. Normally my wife helps me do this, but she just left. So I don't really have any help here. It's not working. Anyway, we're just going to have to hope for the best. Oh, yes, it is. All right, never mind. Sorry, guys. I've just been having so many audio problems with this damned computer that it's old. The computer is really old, and I can't update the software anymore, and blah, blah. So hopefully we'll get through this. So, topic. For the last couple of days, they've been going on and on about how Bill Gates has come out with a new message regarding his thoughts on climate change. I call it global heating because that's physics. Climate change is not physics. Global heating is. I think we need to focus on what we're actually doing. What are we doing to the atmosphere? What are we doing to the Earth dynamic system? Where have we really messed this up? So I call it global heating, and I will be probably calling it that throughout this video. Bill Gates. So he's been on podcasts, he's been on the news, he's been interviewing because I guess he thinks this is important. And you can go to his website and see his recent statement. But what I did to this video, what I did is I went to Gemini on Google and I just asked, what is his new message? And it gave me a summary. And from what I've heard, this is a pretty good summary. So we're just going to roll with that. Do you mind? I don't mind using AI for things like this. I use AI for a lot of things, actually. However, am not an artificial intelligence. I'm the real deal. No guarantees for the future. So what is it? The query I ran was Bill Gates' new message on climate change, and I wanted it as a transcript. So this is what it gave me. So I will start with this, and then I will analyze this. I'm not just here to read something to you. I'm here to make sense of this, or at least what I think is sense of this. And I also did a video some months ago about how the mainstream media has also been taking this approach, and I even did a video linked in the description that quote, nobody cares about climate change anymore. And that was something I was getting from mainstream media. It was literally a podcast where the title was something like, why do people not care about climate change anymore? And I think that reality, that the mainstream media for a couple of months now has been pushing this new message that climate change kind of doesn't matter to people. Okay? They can't claim it doesn't matter at all because it matters. It's going to destroy everything. But they can say with a straight face that it doesn't matter to people. And in that video, I made a claim. You can go watch the video if you want, but I guess the key takeaway is people never did care about climate change or global heating. They never cared. Nobody ever cared. I mean, nobody outside of science and maybe just a few politicians, right? Al Gore. There you go. One. A very small population percentage of the politicians, no economists that I can point to, and very few people actually care about climate change. And the reason for that is very simple. It's highly technical. It's based in hard science, not psychology, not history, not, social memes and social welfare and all these social issues or religion or anything else. It's based in hard science. And people don't care about hard science because they don't care. They don't understand science. You can't care about something you don't understand. You can care about tigers. Someone can tell you, oh my God, there's a tiger loose. Just got out of the zoo. And you'll be you'll be shaking in your shoes, right? You will go to the front door and you'll peek out through a crack. Is there a tiger out there? Because you know already, because it's not hard science, you just know that the behavior of a tiger is it kills people and it eats them. So if we say there's a tiger loose in the neighborhood, or heaven forbid, we live in a different universe and there's 150 tigers loose in the city, then people are really going to be terrified. And you don't have to convince them to be terrified. You just have to tell them there are tigers loose and they're hungry and they're going to do what tigers do. You don't even have to be specific. People will simply know, oh my God, our city is loose, full of tigers or wolves or something else, right? Elephants even. They've all gotten out and there's 150 of them loose in the city, and people will go cautiously to the door and peek through the crack and see if it's safe to go outside. Because we get it. We don't need hard science to explain to us what a tiger is going to do to us if it catches us in the street. We don't need hard science to explain to us what drug gangs are going to do to us if they catch us in the street. Although what people claim about drug gangs is generally unhinged from reality. It's just scaremongering. Drug gangs are a business model. What do you expect them to do? They're going to sell product, right? But you need hard science to understand climate change and global heating, because the global heating part of it is based in physics. And the physics is complicated. And the planet is a big place. We're dealing with the entire planet as a whole. It's called the Earth Dynamic System. And no one understands the Earth Dynamic System. Even many scientists don't address the Earth as an Earth Dynamic System dominated by chaotic and nonlinear elements. Did any of that make any sense to you? Probably not, but that's the truth. And since it is nonlinear and chaotic, chaos not in the political or sociological sense, but chaos in the mathematical sense. We're talking about mathematical chaos here, okay? The worst kind, trust me. You can deal with a lot of other chaos. You cannot deal with mathematical chaos. You can't do it. And yet the Earth Dynamic System is a nonlinear system dominated by chaotic elements. And these chaotic elements cause tipping points, and these are tripped over in a nonlinear way. The past is not a predictor. The present is not a predictor. And you can trip over a tipping point into a chaotic a chaotic excursion, and you nothing you can do. You can't see it coming. There's nothing you can do. And then you're in the grip of physics. That's it. If it's taking you down, then you're going down. And that's it. You're going down. If you step out of the back of an airplane without a parachute, you're going down because of gravity. Not because you got a bad attitude, or you didn't vibe correctly, or you didn't pray to Jesus. Whatever it was you didn't do or did do, it's not going to make any difference. You're going down because of gravity, because of physics. And the Earth Dynamic System is dominated by nonlinear and chaotic elements, and we don't know when they're going to trip and cast us into a new system dynamic completely. And the new dynamic can take decades, if not centuries, to establish, and during that entire time, it's nothing but screaming and prayers and scrambling around and people dying during that entire excursion, the entire time. So that's a thing. That's not going away, but nobody can understand it. Probably most of the listeners to this video won't understand 9 out of 10 of the words I just used. But those are all the words, folks. And I'm not blaming you for not understanding 9 out of the 10 words. I'm a hard scientist. I'm a materialist. I understand what's going on. It's easier for me to understand what's happening to you. You don't understand it. I understand it. And I'm kind of taking on my role as a leader to try and help you understand. And the first and most important thing I can do for you is to help you understand that you don't understand. I mean, that actually is a thing. That is a thing. You think you've got a handle on it, and unless you're a climate scientist who also actually happens to accept that these systems are nonlinear and are dominated by chaotic elements, which there aren't very many climate scientists who actually accept those two conditions, then you won't understand this. Probably half the climate scientists don't understand this. They're not Earth system dynamicists. They're just looking at snowflakes and ice crystals and water runoff and ice melt, and they get their little thing, and they're not looking at the entire system, which is why the science community, the climate science community, is consistently taken by surprise, as it was in 2023. I was not. I mean, course, I was surprised. I didn't predict it, but that's the point. It's nonlinear, dominated by chaotic elements, and what you should expect is the unexpected. You should expect the unexpected. That's the challenge. How can you expect the unexpected? Well, you just kind of have to assume that business as usual is not going forward. And if you understand on an intuitive, instinctive level that business as usual is not going forward, then you have to start scrambling around trying to find another business to be in. And what's that going to look like? Good question. Not very many people have the answer to that. I wrote the book. Link in the description. So let's look at Bill Gates. Okay, that's all background. That's not a random rant from my part. That's background to this. All right? With all that background, let's look at Bill Gates. I don't know if it says it here. I don't think it says it in this summary. Okay, it does say it right here, down in the context. Okay, so he wrote a book in 2021. That's only 4 years ago, folks, and it was titled "How to Avoid Climate Disaster." Him, Bill Gates, in 2021, could have said anything he wanted to say about this topic in 2021. Could have said anything he wanted to say, however he wanted to say it, and at the end could have titled his book anything he wanted to call it. And he chose this 4 years ago. Fast forward 4 years, and he's changed his tune. What has changed? What has changed from 2021, where it's a climate disaster, such that in 2025, he thinks that's not our most important challenge? Because that's what he's thinking now. And that's why everybody's talking about this. How is it that Bill Gates, who could have written anything he wanted to write, titled any title he wanted to give it, and had any summaries and any recommendations he wanted to come up with, anything he wanted to do, 2021, no one told him to write it. He's not part of the grant mill. He doesn't have to churn on graduate students. He doesn't have to publish every 3 years. He could have done it or not done it and said anything or nothing and titled it whatever he wanted. This is what he did. 4 years later, he's changed his mind. So let's go up and look at what AI thinks is currently going on. I will read this, you can read this, and you can also run this query. I'm showing you the query because there's no link, right? This is not an article. This is AI overview. In a recent message, Bill Gates argued that climate change efforts should shift focus from solely reducing emissions to also prioritizing improving lives by addressing poverty and disease, especially in the world's poorest countries. Okay, that is the twist. There are a couple of reasons why he's doing this. Let's read the summary, the overview, and then I'll tease this apart. But I think it's important that we all understand why he's making this change. It's just been 4 years. Okay, it's just been 4 years, and yet already he's changing his mind. He believes this is a more pragmatic approach, stating that while climate change is serious, it is a chronic rather than existential threat. A chronic threat means you're going to be stuck with it for a long time. If you have a chronic illness, like asthma or something, you're stuck with it for life. It's chronic. Chronos means time, right? So chronic, you're stuck with it. An existential threat, and by the way, chronic threats can become existential threats. Your asthma could kill you. But an existential threat means that your existence is hanging in the balance. You may not exist. You may not survive. So an existential threat and a chronic threat can be the same thing. Your chronic illness could kill you. Your chronic illness could be an existential risk for you. It may cause you to not continue and survive. But he's saying here that climate change, while serious, is a chronic long-term rather than an existential risk. And the biggest problems for the poor, he's speaking specifically of the poor, remain poverty and disease. Now, two things can be true. I'll state two things that are true. The biggest problem for the poor is climate change and global heating. The biggest problem for the poor is poverty and disease. Those can both be true. But one must be bigger than the other. No, not really. In fact, one, poverty and disease, could even be caused by climate change. Starvation can be caused by climate change. Loss of habitat for human lives and well-being, loss of habitat, can be caused by climate change. Collapse of civilizations can be caused by climate change. Climate change is physics. Well, climate change isn't. Global heating is physics. It results in climate change in many cases. But the global heating part is physics. Inescapable. Cannot escape it. It's physics. These are the laws of physics. The laws of the universe have come home to roost. And now we're going to get knock-on effects, including poverty and disease. So two things can be true at the same time. You've got yourself some global heating. That's true. That's going to turn around and cause poverty and disease, which will also be true when it happens and where it happens. So two things can be true at the same time. He's saying one is more important than the other. No, one is a primary causation and the other is a secondary effect. Global heating is a primary cause because it's physics. Poverty and disease is a secondary outcome. That doesn't mean by being secondary it's less important. One thing, physics, causes the other thing, sociological harm, poverty and disease. I'll read that sentence again. He believes this is a more pragmatic approach, maybe, depending on what your definition of pragmatic is, stating that while climate change is serious, it is a chronic rather than an existential threat, and the biggest problem for the poor remain poverty and disease, not climate change. Gates suggested that resources should be allocated to initiatives that have the greatest impact on human welfare. That's the value judgment. And that we should question if spending millions to cut small amounts of emissions is worthwhile compared to funding health and food security programs. So on one level, this is him giving up. 4 years ago, he was like, I haven't read his book, but let's just imagine what he said, that in 2021, this was an existential crisis and a disaster, and we need to throw everything we have at it. In 2025, he's saying, yeah, that didn't work. And it didn't. And by the way, we didn't even try. We didn't throw anything at it. And he even calls it here, spending millions to cut small amounts of emissions. He's right about this. We spent millions to cut small amounts of emissions. What we should have done, and the title of this video is that he's right on something and he's wrong about some others. He's right about this. We spent millions to cut small amounts of emissions. We should have spent trillions to cut enormous amounts of emissions. We didn't. The Paris Climate Accords required us to spend over a period of time, 7 years or so, trillions of dollars to cut most greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel consumption. Instead, we spent millions to cut small amounts. Now, millions sounds like a lot of money to the average Joe, but to someone like me, who's been following this space and understood the nature of the challenge, this is minimal effort. Millions is nothing. And if you then want to point out, well, we didn't have trillions to spend. One, we probably did. I mean, you could scratch around under the sofa cushions and find trillions of dollars if all the countries in the world contributed. Okay? Just under the sofa cushions. Taking from military budgets, taking from and anywhere that there's money sloshing around in the economy, the military or the economy, where there's money sloshing around, all this investment, all these stock valuations, just take some of that money. Tax the rich if you want to call it that, but that's not what it is. You're finding money in the system, and you're using that money in the system to try and save humanity. Could have done that. Didn't do that. Why? Because we're selfish and greedy, and we're racist, and we're a bunch of other things, and we don't care. We're vainglorious. We're egocentric. We want what's good for us. All of us, each of us just as an individual. I was talking to a guy yesterday where he would never buy an electric car and other people never buy an electric car. Well, if there was trillions of dollars thrown at subsidizing the creation and sales of electric cars, or maybe even dare I say it, giving them away, making them available for free, then people would drive electric cars. They would. But we didn't do it. But free electric cars, that sounds like communism. I don't care what it sounds like. We're trying to save ourselves here, okay? We didn't. And that's what Bill Gates is pointing out. We didn't do it. In Paris in 2015, 6 years before he wrote his book, disaster book, right? 2021. 6 years before he wrote that in 2015, we said we were going to do it. And about the time he wrote his book was about the time we were supposed to have done it. From 2015 to 2021, we were supposed to have done it. That's 6 years. We actually gave ourselves 7 years. From signing the Paris Climate Accords in 2015, we gave ourselves 7 years. So about 2022, right? To do the needful. And we didn't. And so he wrote a book saying we need to do this. And now, 5 years further on, we still haven't done it. We're spending millions. When we were on the hook. We signed on the dotted line to spend trillions. It's certainly hundreds of billions. But, $1,000 billion is a trillion. And while we were spending millions on fighting, carbon emissions, which is from fossil fuels, by the way. I have to keep saying that because carbon emissions are not this mythical thing that comes out of the woodwork and we have to fight this thing like we fought the Nazis. It's not like that. We are the carbon emissions. We do this. You do it. I do it. The internet does it. The server farms do it. Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Jeff Bezos are all doing it. We are doing this. The emissions are from us. And so to reduce the emissions or fight the emissions, we must fight ourselves and our consumer habits and our desire for happiness and fun and glamour and business as usual. Some of which is existential. If you can't get to your job in your private car, then you have no money and you starve. If you can't get to the airport to get on your airplane and fly your airplane across the country and get to that important business meeting, then the business meeting doesn't happen, your company goes bankrupt, you're out of a job, you get no money, and you starve. Okay? So there's all these reasons why we have to keep doing these things, as well as, of course, personal pleasure. We like it. We like driving in our beautiful car. Some of us look better in our car than we do outside our car. That's why we tint the windows so black you can't even see who's inside. You just see the car going down. Then the person knows this. They say, okay, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm whatever, I'm skinny, I'm too tall, I'm too short, whatever, and I'm just going to tint the windows so dark you can't see me. And then when you see me going down the street, I'm in my beautiful car with tinted windows. Because they look better in their car. And they look better in their house. And they look better when they take a selfie using a filter. And it's all fake, but it doesn't matter. They need business as usual to feel good about themselves. And when they're really down, they go to Disneyland, which is also emissions. So we do all these emissions to feel good about ourselves and to survive and to have food and clothing and shelter and water and utilities of all other kinds and pay our mortgage. And there's food at the store and there's first responders who will come racing to your house every time you have a heart palpitation or you're lonely or whatever's going on in your life. And without that, we die. Without fossil fuels and the emissions that come from fossil fuels, we die. So we didn't cut the fossil fuels, and therefore we didn't cut the emissions. Key points of the message. I don't know why it keeps showing me a pop-up. Okay, there are how many? 5 key points to his message. This is AI. I don't know how good of a job it does, but generally it does a good job. They are shifting priorities, focus on poverty, health and prosperity as defense, pragmatic resource allocation, and innovation and adaptation. So let's just go down the list, shall we? Shifting priorities. Gates advocates... Why does it keep doing that? Shifting priorities. Gates advocates for a strategic pivot in global climate action, urging a focus on the overall metric of human welfare over just emissions and temperature change. Okay, I don't even know what global climate action is, and neither do you, and neither does he. Nobody knows what this means. They always trot this out when they don't want to mean anything. They trot this out when they don't want to say something that someone else can point to and say, aha, you're one of those people. They trot out the global climate action pony, and everyone likes a pony. And so this is non-threatening, non-assertive, no actions required, global climate action. So, Gates advocates for a strategic pivot in global climate action, urging focus on overall metrics of human welfare. Well, that's not climate action. Whatever climate action is, focusing on human welfare is not it. Now, you can focus on human welfare. That's fine. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying it's not the same thing as taking action on climate change. You're focusing on human welfare. Well, hell, we've been focusing on human welfare for what, 6,000, 8,000 years? What do you think we've been doing? Why do you think all of us are so filthy rich? And even if you're not filthy rich, you're rich compared to even the King of England in the year 1400. You're still rich. Your life is enriched by everything we've done. And we've done nothing but improve metrics of human welfare. So we've been doing that. We know how to do that. Maybe we don't always do it. And there's reasons for not doing it, right? Mostly selfishness and greed and political power and privilege and all these things. And keeping the right people at the top and keeping the poor people, the wrong people. This is not me. Okay, this is them. Keeping the wrong people, and you know who you are, keeping the wrong people down. Okay, so we improve outcomes for humans, except we increase the disparity. So we've been doing that for 6,000 years. How long have we been focusing on this global climate action? Well, we signed the Paris Climate Accords in 2015, did exactly fuck all with that, and so I don't know that we ever have. In 2015, we looked at global climate action. 2015, signed the Paris Climate Accords, and nothing has happened since. Focus on poverty and disease. So this is what he wants. He argues that poverty and disease are the biggest problems for the world's poorest people, and efforts should prioritize alleviating these issues, which are the most immediate threats to their lives. Poverty and disease. I would say they are the most visible problems for the world's poorest people. Poverty and disease. I mean, poverty is what you get when you're poor, right? And disease is what happens when no one's providing you with medical care and attention, or clean water, right? Or clean air. A lot of these poor people are forced to live in very marginal neighborhoods that are impacted by industrial runoff, air pollution, water pollution, food pollution, right? The stuff in their food they're eating. They get very marginal everything, and then they get sick. So if you wanted to prioritize the poorest people, which you probably should do, is go into their neighborhoods and tell the corporations that are operating there, factories and everything else, stop polluting. That would help them with their diseases. And some of their diseases are parasites, but most of the time it's exposure to chemicals. Most of the time. I mean, really, seriously. And all of the great die-offs of people, like in India with the Bhopal disaster, that's just corporations being a bunch of fuck-ups. Not giving any shits about people. Killing people without caring. And thinking they'll get away with it. It's convenient. We have a disaster. We're not going to announce it. We're not going to tell anybody to run away, because then we'd be held responsible. And so we're just going to pollute and kill these people, and then we'll take whatever slap on the wrist. And Union Carbide, I think they were run out of India, but they're still a company. I mean, in theory, they got ran out of India. They're still operating someplace else. They just moved their factory from India, which doesn't want them anymore, to Pakistan, right? Nothing stops these people, these companies. So you're going to focus on poverty and disease. Well, then tell corporations what to do. A great start. You'll probably solve 90% of your problem right there. And spend money on people. You want to bring them out of poverty? Just spend money on people. Go ahead. You were going to steal money from global climate action to give it to the people? Why don't you steal money from the corporations? Why don't you steal money from the military? Why don't you steal money from the elites and the richest and the stock markets and all the capital gains and everything else? Tax those motherfuckers. Then spend that money on the people, and meanwhile continue to fight the existential crisis that is global heating and climate change. You could do it that way, but he's not advocating for that, is he? He doesn't mention any corporate malfeasance. He doesn't mention any of the elite problems, and why would he not? Because he's a captain of industry, and he's one of the elites, and he's not going to advocate you tax him and give that money to the poor. He's going to advocate that you stop spending money on climate change and spend it on poverty and disease. What else would he say? I'm not impressed that he changed his mind. Pragmatic resource allocation. He proposes a pragmatic approach. Pragmatic. Oh, I could do so much with that word. Self-serving, right? Elitist. Business as usual. An elitist approach to resource allocation. See what happens when you do that? Okay? A politically acceptable approach to resource allocation. See what I just did there? An economically acceptable approach to resource allocation. Pragmatic is just a word, but in this context, it means something. It's covering up for something else. He proposes a pragmatic approach to resource allocation, questioning whether spending millions on a project that reduces a small amount of emissions is a better use of funds than, for example, funding vaccines. Global heating just spun up the worst hurricane in Atlantic history. His name was Melissa. A few days ago, it came ashore in Jamaica and pretty much destroyed the place. I think the west side of the east side of the country is still intact. The rest of it is destroyed. And Jamaica has, 4 million people? I just learned that number recently. And their economic income from selling a few things, probably sugarcane, rum, right? They're famous for both of those. And also, of course, tourism. Fine. I don't have a problem with that. Their income from selling a few goods, industries, and then mostly tourism, was $4 billion, which is not chump change, but for 4 million people, that's $1,000 per capita of income for the country. So every year, the country generates enough income to support people with $1,000 annually. $1,000 annually per person. Now, Melissa came ashore and destroyed the western part of Jamaica. Destroyed their economy. It's uncertain when they'll be able to resume exporting sugarcane and derivative products and rum, Jamaican rum. It's also uncertain. Well, I can tell you, the western side of Jamaica is done. They're completely done. They will never recover. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe those people go and live in the eastern side because it wasn't destroyed. They still have infrastructure when it's repaired. There's electricity, water service, a bunch of other things on the east side. So maybe the people on the west side move to the east side. I don't know. But let me tell you something. Whatever they do, whatever happened to them, wherever they go, whatever happens to the nation of Jamaica, I can tell you one thing. It wouldn't have mattered if every single person in Jamaica had their vaccines. Why do I say that? Because down here in his pragmatic resource allocation, he says he would rather have people vaccinated. That doesn't save you from Hurricane Melissa. And why am I comparing the two? Remember, way up here, he says, advocates for a strategic pivot in global climate action, urging a focus on overall metrics of human welfare. For example, not having your country destroyed. That's a good start. And yet Melissa destroyed Jamaica. Melissa is 100% attributable to global heating. 100%. It was able to do what it did, which is now makes it the strongest hurricane ever seen in the Atlantic and Caribbean basins. Also, it originated in the Caribbean region. It didn't travel very far in the Caribbean region before it was suddenly a Category 5 hurricane. And it was the strongest Category 5 hurricane ever seen anywhere in the Atlantic or the Caribbean. All because of global heating. And why was that? Because the Caribbean Ocean and also the Gulf of Mexico further north are record hot. And sometimes you'll even get meteorologists telling you when they're analyzing this problem, oh yeah, Melissa was caused because the sea surface temperatures were record hot. Sometimes they'll tell you that. No, they want to skip it because their audience doesn't want to hear that. Again, no one understands this. Go back to my earlier discussion when I was ranting about this. Nobody understands this. The fact that the sea surface temperatures are record hot doesn't register with most people. And then when you try to link that to hurricanes, that doesn't make any sense to them. because they don't understand that hurricanes and cyclones in general, sometimes they're called typhoons or whatever, are heat engines. Heat engines. They move heat, and in the process of moving heat and taking advantage of that, they spin up. And the more heat they can move, the more they spin, faster and they spin. And the more heat is available, the bigger they get. And then you get some monster like Melissa, Hurricane Melissa, that has really high wind speeds. I mean, like off the charts high, and really huge storm, and it moved right into Jamaica like within 24 hours of spinning up. It was nothing, and then it was everything. It went from nothing to everything. This is called bombogenesis. That's actually a word. It's called bombogenesis, and bombogenesis is referred as, they're called bomb cyclones. When they undergo bombogenesis, they're called bomb cyclones. And you see where this is headed, right? A bomb cyclone is defined when it has decreased central barometric pressure by 24 parts, milligrams of mercury, 24 parts in 24 hours. When it can intensify in central barometric pressure by 24 points in 24 hours, that's bombogenesis. That's the definition of bombogenesis. And we're talking cyclones. We're always talking cyclones. It's always a cyclone when you're having this discussion. Melissa intensified at double that, 48 points of barometric pressure in 24 hours. Double bombogenesis. Unheard of. Never happened before. Probably wasn't even theoretically allowed for. There are, before I leave this, there are other theoretical types of storms. For example, the one I can think of is called a hypercane. Hypercanes are cyclones. They're huge. The amount of power that's entrained or basically included in the cyclone is enormous, and they're so huge and they're so enormous that they can cross continents without dying off. Even though they're not over the water anymore, they're not really a heat engine because there's no heat underneath them to drive the engine. Yet they can cross cyclones, continents, and when they cross the continent and they're back over water, then there's water heat, and so they can spin back up again, and then they cross over to another continent and they cross that continent, and now they're not over water, but it's a hypercane, so it can cross the entire continent until at some point, right, all of our continents are surrounded by water. That's kind of how it is on Earth. Then you finally hit water again and it spins back up, and then it can cross over yet another continent. And these are hypothetical storms. There are certain conditions they think are necessary for these storms. I don't think they know for sure, but we're starting to see that behavior. Melissa is not a hypercane, but the behavior that was witnessed with Melissa is the same behavior we would expect to see with these theoretical hypercanes. So we're on that path. We're headed there. And I would say, one Melissa is enough to destroy Jamaica, probably for all time. But I know that's not the topic today. But I just want to make a statement here. Hurricane Melissa is enough of a hurricane to destroy Jamaica, probably for all time. Maybe the eastern part still operates. A one hypercane can destroy multiple nations for all time. See what I just said? If a hypercane crosses into the U.S., goes over 13, 15, 20 states, and then goes back out into the Atlantic to spin up again, destroying 13, 15 states in the U.S. on the way back out to the Atlantic will destroy the U.S. as a country. And even if it doesn't, those multiple states are done, because a hypercane it's huge. There's a lot of water dropping. The amount of energy in the system is simply incomprehensible. And the winds are probably 250, 300 miles an hour. So this is like multiple times worse than even a tornado. So everything, every structure, every building, not really, really well built, like out of solid concrete. Every building not built to very, very tough standards will be flattened, slabbed, just ripped off the surface of the earth. And every human in every building will be killed. And every human anywhere in these states where a hypercane might come ashore will be basically killed. The number of survivors will probably number in the hundreds. Melissa is on that pathway. it will probably destroy Jamaica as a going concern. If not, it will be half the country it was, literally half. If the tourists ever come back, and they may not, and if they ever figure out how to export products, which they may not, then they can be half of a country. Where was I? I got down to pragmatic resource allocation. I think that I skipped, you may have noticed this, you're probably yelling at me, health and prosperity as a defense. This is actually, this probably should have been further down the list. He's saying we should focus on poverty and disease, we should use our resources pragmatically, and if we do those two things, then really this third one comes in, which is we're using health and prosperity as a defense. Actually, there was nothing you could have done on Jamaica. No amount of health, no amount of prosperity, no amount of building code changes, no amount of rebuilding all those buildings. You could have poured half a $500 billion. You could have poured $500 billion into Jamaica. Rebuild every home to modern code and storm standards. And I know what those are, so I know how involved that is. And it wouldn't have mattered. They would have been flattened anyway. And in the case of even worse storms to come, doubly so. So here's what Bill Gates says. He suggests that health and prosperity are the best defense against climate change. They're no defense of any kind. Citing research that shows projected deaths from climate change fall significant with economic growth. Not true. Economic growth contributes to carbon emissions. Economic growth contributes to global heating. Economic growth is the problem here. And I know we all want economic growth and jobs and GDP, and everybody wants this because they think this is it, and the it is the it. And we can't if we don't have it, we don't have any it, and we all need these things. And but economic growth is the problem. Now, Bill Gates, as a captain of industry, wants economic growth. That's profits. He could have said profits, but he didn't. He just said economic growth. Economic growth is an increase in profits, increase in sales, increase in shipping of goods, increases in employees being paid, and all these kind of things, increases in consumerism. That's economic growth, and that leads to increased profits, because that's what he's after. Economic growth also leads to increases in the harms caused by global heating, because you can't have economic growth without consumption of fossil fuels. And if you want to increase economic growth, you must increase the consumption of fossil fuels. And if you increase the consumption of fossil fuels, you increase carbon emissions. And if you increase carbon emissions, then you enhance the greenhouse effect. And if you enhance the greenhouse effect, you get global heating. And when you get global heating, you get all these other harms caused by all the energy in the system, including things like Melissa, which can start in your backyard, almost literally, and in one day undergo double bombogenesis and come ashore and destroy your entire country. Or in the case of the U.S., in your entire state. But he wants you to know, if you're healthy and wealthy, you'll survive Melissa. And you won't. You won't survive global heating if you're healthy and wealthy. Now, the wealthy, of course, can always escape. They can run ahead. There were wealthy tourists who came to Jamaica, and they didn't even get on the jets to run away. That's how stupid people are. This is how little leadership we have. No one told them, these rich white people, no one told them, you need to get out of Jamaica. You've got a ticket. You've already got a return trip ticket. You need to leave. Nobody told them that. You know why? Because they didn't want them to leave. And they certainly didn't want any bad news about Jamaica. I was in Jamaica, but I had to leave as soon as I arrived and I had to use my return ticket. And now I'm out both tickets, and I rented my hotel, and I'll never get that money back. And I arrived and I left because there was a storm, and they told me to leave. So they're not going to do that. They're never going to say that. No leader will ever utter those words. If you have a return ticket, you should leave Jamaica before the storm comes. They did not do it because they didn't want people to leave. They didn't want the message to get out that we told people to leave Jamaica because there was a hurricane coming. And it cost each of them on average $5,000, both tickets both ways, plus the hotel rental, plus the car rental, plus the everything, all the tours they had laid up, paid in advance, right? We took their money and we told them to leave. That would be the meme. They took my money and then they told me to leave, and then a hurricane came ashore, and it turned out to be nothing. But I still had to give them my money and then leave because they were all worried. And so nobody left. And all these rich people, they were living in hotels and they had a return ticket in their hands. They already prepaid return ticket. They didn't leave, and nobody else in Jamaica left. They could not run this thing. There was nowhere to go. Who's going to take them in? Who's going to take in a bunch of Jamaicans? Who's going to take them in? The U.S. under Donald Trump? No. The U.S. would meet them at the gates. They would get off the airplane with their few belongings, running ahead of the storm. They'd get off the plane at the gates, and the ICE agents would arrest them on the spot. Guaranteed. They know where the plane's coming from. They know who's on it. And, they'll probably skip the white people, but that's like two, 3 people, right? And the rest of them are Jamaicans. Dark skin. They don't look wealthy. They don't speak English very well. And you just arrest them. Throw them in a prison. Use them for slave labor later. It's fine. And so, no, they're not going to leave Jamaica. And if they do, it's going to be a disaster for them because Trumpism. I'm not making that up. That's how they do this shit, okay? No one should be coming to the U.S. Even the white Europeans are having trouble coming to the U.S. They get off the plane and they get arrested because they're foreigners. And it's 10 times as bad if you have a dark skin. Innovation adaptation. Okay, yeah, this has been going on a long time. Explain this. Can't be done. Gates acknowledges that innovation is crucial and that reducing the cost of green technology is a key part of the solution, but insists this must be done alongside other vital efforts to improve human lives. Again, the same thing. If you want to invest in solar panels, fine, but you also must invest in vaccines. If you want to invest in wind farms and other green technology and community battery storage, okay, but you still must invest in alleviating poverty. And that's what he wants you to focus on. In fact, he wouldn't mind if you just didn't invest in green technology, so-called green. None of it's green, by the way, but that's their term for it, so I'll use it. He doesn't care if you do not invest in any green technology, but you should invest in alleviating poverty and funding vaccines. Context and reception. Departure from past messaging. This message is seen as a significant shift from his 2021 book titled How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, end quote, and his previous emphasis on climate change as an overwhelming existential threat. Well, when did that change? When did something improve? This is my question. Hey, Bill, that's fine that you've changed your mind. Would you mind explaining to me what has suddenly made this not an overwhelming existential threat anymore? Such that poverty is an overwhelming existential threat. Poverty is an existential threat. People have been poor and suffering deprivation for thousands of years. They were poor and suffering diseases when you were still working at Microsoft as a multi-billionaire. All right. And we even had the USAID program, USAID, that was trying to deal with these problems with poverty and disease for 50 years, maybe 60 years. What was the start of that? It wasn't FDR, but it might have been. I don't know who started that. Who started USAID? Anyway, the Trump administration just canceled it. He didn't cancel it because we don't have any poverty in the world. He didn't cancel it because there's no diseases in the world. He canceled it because he didn't want to spend the money, or he wanted to punish those people, or America first, or whatever his logic is. Now all of a sudden Bill Gates comes along and says, wow, we must deal with this poverty, and maybe in part he's saying this now because of Donald Trump, maybe. But if global heating is still, if we haven't fixed or even addressed the problem of global heating, then it is still, I mean, why would it not be, an overwhelming and existential threat? Go ask the Jamaicans. Criticism. Critics have argued that this presents a false dichotomy. I'm kind of arguing that, right? A false dichotomy means you're saying it's one or the other. When that's a false dichotomy. When the reality may be it's this and that. It's not this or that. That's a dichotomy, and it may not be true. And it's not true if it's this and that, because two things can be true at once. People can't be poor and dealing with disease, and it's possible that they will be completely flattened and killed and murdered by global heating. Both these things can be true. And if you want to weigh them and say, well, this one a little more than that one or whatever, then I guess you can do that, but that might be a false dichotomy. The people in Jamaica could have been completely vaccinated. The island of Jamaica could be completely free of communicable diseases. And they could be living, they're getting $1,000 a year a person, but let's say let's say tourism was such and prices and whatnot were such that they were getting $10,000 a year per person of additional income, plus whatever they're doing internally, right? They can make money internally by providing services among the population. But let's say in addition to that, there's another $10,000 a year coming in per capita from tourism. Okay, that's 10 times more than they were getting before, and that might have been really great for them. Melissa still would have destroyed them. So this is, you can alleviate poverty, you can alleviate disease, and then be murdered by a hurricane because global heating didn't go away. It just didn't. Where's it going to go? It can't go anywhere. It's physics. You step out of the back of an airplane without a parachute on, gravity grabs you and kills you. Why? Because gravity didn't go away. There's nowhere for gravity to go. Gravity is a feature of the planet Earth. And you're on the planet Earth, and you're not on the moon, and you're not on Mars, you're on the planet Earth. And so there's a value for gravity on the planet Earth. And it is such that if you step out of the back of an airplane with no parachute on, you're going to die. There you go. And Melissa was physics. It was created by global heating. And you don't want to believe that. You don't see any proof of that. No one's talking about that. I don't care. I don't care. This is science now. I don't care what the meteorologist tells you. I don't care what the politician tells you. I don't care what the economist tells you. I don't care what your spiritual leader tells you. This is hard science, people. We're in the realm of physics. If you don't understand physics, that's fine. That's maybe good for your life, but it's going to kill you anyway. You don't understand gravity. You don't understand Einstein's equations. You don't understand Newton's work with gravity. That's fine. And gravity is still going to kill you. It's going to kill you. It's going to smash you, break every bone in your body, and splat you like a squirrel roadkill. Okay? It's going to kill you, and gravity is going to murder you if you step out of the back of an airplane without a parachute on. And you don't understand global heating. That's fine. Just don't mess around with it. It's going to kill you. It can kill you just as fast as gravity can. Ask the people in Jamaica. Global heating can fuck you up. Poverty can fuck you up. Disease is not good. These are things we have to deal with. We can spend money on vaccines, and we can even cure some diseases. You can't cure global heating. There is no cure. Criticism. Critics have argued that this presents a false dichotomy, as climate change is a root cause of suffering related to poverty and disease. I think I said that earlier, making it difficult to separate the two. You can get disease from global heating. You can get poverty from global heating. Ask the people in Jamaica. Ask them. When the cholera epidemic starts, which is typical of these storm-related damages, when the cholera epidemic starts and starts killing people, you're not going to hear about it. Mainstream media or Bill Gates, nobody is going to talk about that. The cholera epidemic is because of Melissa destroying the island and leaving huge pools of stagnant, contaminated water that if anybody even touches it, even wades through it, even rubs their nose with their wet hand from having been in the water, they're going to get cholera. And it's going to kill them because there's no treatment, because there's no hospitals, and there's no medicine, and there's no doctors and nurses. Why? Because of Melissa. Right? Melissa flattened the country, flattened the medical system, created the conditions for cholera, killed the people. There's no medical system. There's no first responders. There's no emergency rooms. There's no medications. There's nothing, and they're going to die from disease caused by conditions left behind by Melissa, caused by global heating. That's how this works, people. It doesn't work another way. And you can focus on the diseases and then die of cholera from a hurricane and the destruction of your property and the exposure of people wading around in contaminated water, no housing. And it takes the water a month to go away. And then it's full of dead animals and eventually dead people. And it's just a hellscape. It's a hellscape. And then there's disease. And then there's death. And nobody cares. I'm telling you how it is. And nobody will care. Because nobody cares about global heating and climate change. They care about whatever they care about. And Bill Gates doesn't care anymore. He wrote the book in 2021. Oh my God, this is a hellscape. And then by 2025, whatever. Let's focus on diseases and poverty. Meanwhile, global heating is going to bring all the poverty and disease you can handle. Well, probably more than you can handle. And we're going to find out what happens with Jamaica. Response from Gates, probably to the criticism, right? In interviews, Gates has maintained that he is not abandoning climate action. No, fuck, he's not. But rather arguing for a more balanced and holistic approach that considers how climate change interacts with other global issues. Climate change is the issue. And to bring that point home, it's not climate change. It's global heating is the issue. And heating is physics. And you are in an oven. And it's going to get hot. And it's going to get worse. And you're going to be poor as a result. And you're going to be dead as a result. And if you're not dead, you're going to be diseased as a result. And global heating is the thing. It's the thing. And everything comes from the thing. Everything else that maybe is more tangible to you because you don't really understand global heating. Global heating, well, what the heck is that? But and they make it even less tangible by calling it climate change. What's climate change? I don't know. Anybody see the sports section? I got to read up on my teams. But you call it global heating, at least you can kind of understand what it is. It's going to get hot. And the Caribbean Ocean and then even the Gulf of Mexico are record hot. That's instrumental. We can measure that. And why is it global hot? Because of global heating. Why is it record hot? Because of global heating. There you go. And then Melissa. And whatever comes after that. And we've had huge disasters here in the United States because of global heating. Heating the waters in the Gulf of Mexico. And tropical storms and storm remnants coming ashore in the U.S. and causing massive catastrophes. Just incomprehensibly bad tragedies in different parts of the lower U.S., in particular the Southeast. Just incomprehensible tragedies that nobody talks about. And those people are angry that we're not talking about them. Too bad. You don't control the media. You don't control FEMA. You don't control the Trump administration. You don't have money. You don't have a voice. No one cares what you think. And that's the same thing going to happen to the Jamaicans. They don't control their lives. They never did. They were children of capitalism and consumerism. They needed the tourist money, and even when the time came to get everybody the fuck out of Jamaica who had a ticket, they didn't do it. They didn't tell them, oh, you got a ticket, you need to get out of here. They didn't do it. Nor will they, ever. They'll never do that. People may figure it out themselves. I'm here in Jamaica. I don't know why I'm here. The place is a disaster, but I've got my ticket to return home. But it's pretty. I'm in the eastern side. I'm in Kingston. It's not great, but it's not that bad, and I'm here. And then another hurricane shows up. Do you think they're not going to leave? They will. Even if the people of Jamaica and the government of Jamaica is telling them, oh, don't worry about this hurricane, it's nothing. Melissa was a fluke. We'll never have one of those again. That was a 1 in a 100-year event. You're here in Jamaica. Enjoy Jamaica. Drink the rum. Enjoy the sights. Eat out at the restaurants. They're not going to tell you to leave. But you might leave because you were just listening to what happened with Melissa. So you might want to get the hell out of Jamaica. No government's going to tell you that. Maybe people learn from these events. Maybe they don't. Maybe people just have their head come firmly and completely up their ass. And what can I say about that? How do I feel about that? People got their head up their ass. Okay. Good luck. He considers himself both a climate activist and a child survival activist. Well, the children in Jamaica are dead because of climate. Not climate. I have to say it because it's in the sentence, okay? The children in Jamaica died because of global heating. And global heating was going to kill all the children. So if you're a child survival activist and you go in and you vaccinate every child against every disease, and then Global heating comes along, kills them all. What have you accomplished? Nothing. Not true. What have you accomplished? You were seen as trying to help people. And you're Bill Gates, and you've got a bad reputation. And now you have a good reputation. You're seen and you're upheld. And of course, he gets lots of awards, lots of fuzzies. I don't know who it is keeps calling me. You get all the warm fuzzies, and you don't have to deal with global heating and climate change, which is a loser battle. We signed the Paris Climate Accords in 2015, did nothing, and now 2025, 10 years later, it's a loser. 2025, that's a loser. That's a big L, okay? Big L on the Paris Climate Accords. And if you were saying, oh yeah, we're going to do the Paris Climate Accords and save humanity from global heating, loser. Okay? Who wants to be on that sinking ship? Who wants to be associated with that? Nobody. That's the big L. We did nothing. And fossil fuel consumption increased to new records, as it will next year as well. And carbon emissions, as a consequence, also increased to new record levels. And carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere went up to new records. And the rate at which carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going up is also going up. The rate is going up. It's accelerating. It's faster last year than it was all the years before. Losers. L for you. So now he wants to talk about vaccines and poverty. And by the way, he can't win at that either. But at least he gets to wear the halo, right? He gets to wear the halo. Look at what I'm doing. I'm vaccinating children. Okay? He gets to wear the halo instead of the L. And 4 years after he wrote, what was the name of his book? How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. He was being prescriptive. How to avoid. I haven't even read the book. I don't need to. It's all bullshit. Because you can't. You can't avoid climate disaster. But he wrote the book, How to Avoid Climate Disaster. This is like a recipe book, right? How to make beef stroganoff. How to make a pasta salad, right? How to avoid climate disaster. It's a recipe book. He's got bullet points. He's got slides and recommendations and policy recommendations and behavioral changes and lifestyle changes. How to avoid a climate disaster. How to make sure that we don't have Melissa tearing Jamaica to pieces. He gave up on that. He wrote the book in 2021. In 2025, he's like, oh yeah, forget that. Loser. He realized it's a loser. It's a loser proposition. He wrote the book in 2021. People said, yeah, Bill, go pound sand. Loser. It's all downhill from here, people. They're giving up. They're backing away. They're going a different direction. They don't want you to know about this. They don't want you to talk about this. They can't deal with this. They've given up. They signed the Paris Climate Accords in 2015, did exactly nothing that was in the recommendations, not the first part of it. And now, 10 years later, it's like, well, you kind of fucked up, didn't you? You could have taken this seriously 10 years ago. Now it's 10 years further on. You fucked it up, didn't you? You had a plan. You were going to do something. You were going to save the world from global heating, and you couldn't. That doesn't look good, does it? You had all this money, all this supposed technology. You signed the agreement. We're going to do this. We have everything we need to do this. We just have to spend money in a certain way, develop certain technologies, and 10 years later, you didn't do it. You're a bunch of losers. You didn't save us. You didn't do the first thing. And Bill Gates wrote his book in 2021, and 4 years later, he doesn't want to be the loser. Because he knows. He knows. Jeff Bezos knows. Elon Musk knows. Elon Musk is jonesing for the rapture. He's heading for Mars, baby. Why do you think he's going to Mars and spending his own money to get there? He's going to Mars. You rest of you motherfuckers can be cannibal zombies. He doesn't even care. He'll have complete control over the Martian habitat. And if he doesn't want global heating on Mars, he doesn't have to have it because he's Emperor Musk. He has whatever he wants on Mars. You can't do that here. We signed the Paris Climate Accords. 10 years later, losers. So that's Bill Gates. He's right about some things, and he's wrong. He was right in 2021, that's my guess, just from the title of the book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. Not that you can, but at least he was on the right track. No, we couldn't avoid a climate disaster in 2021. I don't have any data on this, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and say we passed the point of being able to avoid a climate disaster. I mean, if that's what the topic is, how to avoid a climate disaster. We were no longer on that glide path 50 years ago, maybe 70 years ago. The last time we could have had a healthy, realistic adult conversation about avoiding climate disaster would have been in 1950. Okay, 75 years ago, 1950. We just come out of the war. We burned a lot of fossil fuels in the war, but we just come out of the war. We could have said, oh man, that was fucked up. Let's not do that again. And while we're at it, we have to stop burning fossil fuels. That was a big deal. And look, the Germans fought most of their war trying to get crude oil so they could fight more war. So we see where this is headed, right? And let's not do this. Let's get off this train. Let's stop this race, and we'll stop burning fossil fuels. We'll give ourselves a couple of decades to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. We'll create other forms of transportation, economic systems, agriculture, habitation, probably more electricity than anything else. And where's the electricity going to come from? Well, we can innovate there. And of course we did. We have solar panels now. So when do those come along? Yeah, now we have them. And then there's wind farms. We have those too. So if we had been, getting off of fossil fuels the whole entire time that we were developing these other technologies, we might have done more nuclear, for example, right? Then maybe by now we could have this conversation like, phew, we really avoided a bullet there. The parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, we're still at about 350, 360, and that's probably manageable. We're getting some harm from that, even at that level, but it's not as worse as it could have been. I mean, imagine, what if it was 430? Instead of 350, it was 430. Imagine that. Wow. That's not a future any of us want to live in. And, even if it took a long time to get to 430 parts per million, that would leave a mark. It would really fuck people up. You'd have poverty. You'd have diseases. You'd have everything else in the world at 430 parts per million. Guess what the level of CO2 in the atmosphere is right now? 430 parts per million. So if we'd had this discussion 75 years ago, when maybe we could have kept things to 350, something like that, then we'd be in a very different condition right now. We probably wouldn't have had Melissa. Jamaica today would be fine, might even be better than fine. They might be going gangbusters because we might have spent money on them. We might have, helped alleviate their poverty. Bill Gates would have been working on their poverty and their diseases. And the rest of us, we would be working on electrifying Jamaica and reducing fossil fuels. And then when Melissa wanted to spin up, late October 2020, there'd be no heat. We wouldn't have global heating. There'd be no heat in the water. And everything else could have happened the way it happened right up to that point, but there'd be no Category 5 double bombogenesis, Hurricane Melissa. And then whatever they had, vaccines, poverty measures, better GDP, more prosperous people, whatever they had in late October 2025, they would have been able to keep it because there'd be no Melissa to take it all away. But that would have been 75 years ago. We would have had that decision. And we didn't. Now we can't. Now we're fucked. Jamaica gets to go first with the fuckitude, but it's coming for the rest of us too. And you don't believe that, and you don't see how that's possible. And in Jamaica, they didn't think it was possible either. Is a story we're hearing. They didn't believe it. The leadership didn't believe it, and they didn't tell people with a round-trip ticket to get out of Jamaica. They didn't believe it. And now they're destroyed. Not that getting out would mean they're not destroyed, but, hey, maybe something would have happened differently. People could have not lost everything, maybe, possibly, not lost everything. And, Jamaicans, have been dealing with the same thing the rest of it. They signed the Paris Climate Accords in 2015. So in theory, the Jamaicans signed on to doing something. In theory, the Jamaicans signed on to that in 2015 because everybody did. It was unanimous. I don't think there was one abstention. Maybe there was one. there may have been more than one, but I think it was the Pacific Island nations who did not think it went far enough. Who didn't think it went far enough. The Paris Climate Accords was falling short. They wanted something else. Okay, fine. They didn't sign it because they wanted something else. Good call, probably. They didn't get something else, and they're not getting anything. Nor did Jamaica. Nor did anybody else. And now we're stuck with it. And maybe 75 years ago, we could have focused on poverty and diseases, and we could have reined in global heating, but we didn't. And now we can't deal with poverty and diseases anymore, because global heating is going to bring poverty and diseases to everybody. Even if you're vaccinated, even if you have a hospital system, even if you've got clinics, walking clinics everywhere, it's not going to help you, because the hurricanes are just going to take it all away. And then you can never have it again. And it was fun while it lasted, and then it's gone. Forever. Because we didn't do it. And that's it. And Bill Gates knows that. We didn't do it. And the time to have done it was back when he was a child. Not before he was a trillionaire. When he was a child. And we didn't do it. They didn't do it then, and he's not doing it now. And it's not going to happen. Lots of reasons why it can't happen. I'm not going to talk about those. Wife just got back. I'm going to get off of this thing and go about my busy day. But I had to talk about Bill Gates because he's in the news and he's trying to make a point, and I don't want you to listen to him. He's right about some things. He was probably more right in the year 2020 when he released his book. He was probably more right then in his assessment. And now he's probably just wrong. But I kind of understand why he's wrong. Because he wants out. He doesn't want to be part of this loser show. He doesn't want the L. Okay? At the end of his life. He doesn't want to be a loser. You can't face it. None of us can. We're all losers now. Because 75 years ago, we didn't do it. And even after signing the Paris Climate Accords, 10 years later, still haven't done it. We're not going to do it. Simple as that. We know now we're not going to do it. So buckle up, Buttercup. This shit's going down. We're in it now. And as usual, my recommendation for you is like the video and subscribe. I come back here and I do this once in a while. And look at my book. It was 100 Days About the Collapse of the World. It's not what you think it is, although it contains cannibal zombies, so something for everybody. But they are scientific zombies, real zombies, not fantasy zombies, real zombies, actual cannibals at the end of the world. And check it out. I think you'd probably find it terrifying, because it's not imaginary. You'll probably find it terrifying. If anything, the book is optimistic. It really does end. Even the last half of the book is really optimistic about what people can do and how they can go about that. So Bill Gates wrote his book in 2021, and I wrote my book in 2025. And even though it's later, and we're obviously screwed, and everyone's a loser, even though all that's happening, I wrote a book that was at least half optimistic. Because I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist. I know what's going on. I know what we can do, and I know what we didn't do, and I know why that's going to come home to roost. I know all that. And I wrote the book. It was 100 Days. Available on Amazon. Paperback, hardback, and ebook, if you're into that. And competitively priced. I'm not making any money on these things. I'm just trying to get it out there. Also, there's a link to buy me a coffee, and we can have a cup of coffee together. I'd like that. That'd be fun. And apart from all that, I'll say to you what I said to the Jamaicans a couple of days ago. Not that it did any good, of course. Get out of the way of this thing. If you've got a return ticket home, go home. And for everybody else, just do everything you can to not die. That's your challenge. Don't die.